People think being alone is the problem, but the Buddha revealed the opposite. Being alone is the path. The moment you stop begging for attention, stop chasing validation, and stop handing your peace to the world, that is the moment everything in your life begins to shift. Because in solitude you finally see who you really are without the noise, without the pressure, without pretending for anyone. And when you face yourself with honesty, your flaws, your desires, your mistakes, your potential, something powerful happens inside you. You stop surviving life and you start transforming. Today, I'm going to show you why becoming a better you, alone, is the turning point where everything finally falls into place. 1. When you walk alone, you finally hear your own mind. Most people move through life without ever truly meeting themselves. They live surrounded by so much noise that they mistake that noise for their identity. From the moment they wake up, their minds are overloaded with the thoughts, opinions, routines, and expectations of others. They scroll through social media and immediately step into a world of comparison. They watch other people's successes and feel pressured to follow the same path, even if it doesn't match who they are. Without realizing it, they begin copying other people's dreams, chasing other people's goals, and shaping their lives based on what the world says they should want. In this constant flood of external influence, their own voice becomes faint, so faint that sometimes they forget it ever existed. But everything begins to change the moment you choose solitude. When you decide to step away from the noise and give your mind the space it desperately needs, a quiet transformation begins. The world around you softens, the endless chatter fades, and for the first time in a long time, you start hearing something you could never hear before: your own truth. You begin to notice thoughts that were always there but never acknowledged. You recognize buried emotions, the fears you avoided, the desires you suppressed, the silent disappointments you carried. In time, you also discover your inner wisdom, the part of you that knows what you truly want, what feels right, and what path your life must take. In solitude, your mind stops behaving like a battlefield full of chaotic thoughts, fighting for your attention. Instead, it becomes a mirror, calm, reflective, honest. This mirror shows you everything clearly: your old habits that kept you stuck, the patterns you repeat without understanding, the wounds you never healed, the insecurities that control your choices, and the beliefs that no longer serve you. These realizations may feel uncomfortable at first, but they are necessary. They are the beginning of real self-awareness. Buddhism teaches that the mind is like water. When the water is constantly shaken with stress, noise, and distractions, it becomes cloudy and you see nothing clearly. But when the water is allowed to settle, when you give yourself silence, space, and time, everything becomes visible. The truths that were hidden beneath the chaos rise to the surface and reveal themselves. This is why walking alone is so powerful. Solitude provides the stillness your mind needs to show you who you really are. It helps you understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your purpose, and your direction in life. And this understanding is the first and most important step toward growth. Because once you truly know yourself, you no longer follow the world. You follow your own path. And that is when your life finally begins to transform. 2. Solitude makes you emotionally independent. Most people don't realize how much of their emotional life is controlled by the world around them. They depend on others for validation, happiness, confidence, and even a sense of identity. A single comment can ruin their mood. One person's silence can make them doubt their worth. One rejection can break their spirit. They feel stable only when others treat them the way they hope, and they collapse the moment people fail to meet their expectations. This emotional fragility isn't because they are weak. It's because they've never learned how to stand on their own inner foundation. Solitude changes that completely. When you spend time alone, you begin understanding your emotions instead of running from them. You start seeing how much of your pain came from leaning too heavily on others, hoping they would make you feel complete, safe, seen, or important. But in solitude, you learn the priceless truth. You are responsible for your own peace. No one else can carry that burden for you. No one else should. When you sit with yourself, without distractions, you begin building emotional muscles you never knew you had. You learn how to calm your own thoughts when they spiral. You learn how to soothe yourself when you feel overwhelmed. You learn how to rely on your inner wisdom instead of depending on someone else's reassurance. And with time, you discover that the strength you were searching for in others was actually buried within you all along. Buddhism teaches that attachments create suffering, not because connection is wrong, but because depending entirely on others makes you unstable. When people become the source of your happiness, they also become the source of your pain. The more you cling, the more you fear losing them. The more you expect, the more you suffer when reality doesn't match your hopes. But when you grow emotionally independent, something incredible happens. You love without fear, you give without insecurity, and you stay strong even when people disappoint you. Solitude gives you the space to remove emotional noise. You stop waiting for someone to fix your sadness, to appreciate your worth, or to tell you who you are. Instead, you begin cultivating inner stability, the kind that doesn't crumble when others change, leave, or fail to understand you. You learn to recognize what emotions belong to you and what emotions you've been absorbing from others for years. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding thoughtfully. You stop letting the world shake you and start choosing your own peace. As your emotional independence grows, something shifts inside you. You no longer chase people. You no longer fear losing them. You no longer break down when someone's opinion goes against your expectations. You become grounded, centered, and calm. People's words may touch you, but they no longer control you. Their approval becomes a bonus, not your survival. That is the quiet power of solitude. It transforms your heart into a sanctuary that belongs to you alone. And once you reach that level of inner strength, no one, absolutely no one, can take your peace away. 3. You outgrow people who only slowed you down. One of the most overlooked truths in life is that growth naturally creates distance. Not because you become arrogant or because you reject people, but because your inner world changes in ways others can no longer match. When you choose to work on yourself, especially when you begin walking alone, you start seeing people and relationships with a clarity you never had before. You notice energies you ignored. You see intentions you once excused. You recognize patterns you tolerated for far too long. And slowly, you begin to understand that not everyone who is close to you is actually good for you. Most people don't realize how much their environment shapes their life. You absorb the fears, habits, attitudes, and energies of the people around you. If you are surrounded by negativity, you begin to think negatively. If you are surrounded by people who are lost, you feel lost with them. If you are surrounded by people with no discipline, your own discipline weakens. This is why Buddha taught that the company you keep is one of the greatest influences on your path. Your circle can either lift you higher or quietly drown your potential. But when you spend time alone, you begin seeing these influences with new eyes. You finally recognize the friend who only called you when they needed something, the relative who drained your peace with constant criticism, the people who were comfortable with your old version but felt threatened by your growth, the ones who said they cared but secretly preferred you weak so they could feel strong. Solitude reveals what noise hides. Walking alone teaches you that not everyone deserves access to your life. Some people stay attached to you not because they support you, but because they fear losing the benefits they get from you. Your time, your energy, your loyalty, your kindness. When you begin leveling up, they can no longer feed off the old version of you, and the distance begins. This distance is not a loss, it's correction. It's life making room for your evolution. You also realize that many people in your life were connected to your past wounds, not your future growth. They were part of a chapter that taught you something, but not part of the chapter that will elevate you. As your mind becomes clearer, you naturally detach from those who thrive on drama, gossip, laziness, and emotional chaos. Their lifestyle no longer matches your intentions. Their conversations no longer resonate with your spirit. Their energy no longer feels aligned with the person you are becoming. Buddhism teaches that attachment is often the cause of unnecessary suffering. We cling to people because we fear change, fear loneliness, or fear hurting them. But what we don't realize is that holding on to the wrong people keeps us stuck in cycles that delay our progress. When you try to grow in the wrong environment, it feels like climbing a mountain with weights tied to your ankles. But when you let go of these weights, even if it's painful, you finally begin to rise. Outgrowing people does not mean you wish them harm or consider yourself superior. It simply means you are choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, growth over stagnation, and purpose over comfort. You are choosing the version of yourself that your own soul has been waiting for. And as you walk further on this path, something beautiful happens. You start attracting people who reflect your new energy, people who support your growth, respect your boundaries, appreciate your silence, and inspire your journey. So when you find yourself losing people during your transformation, understand this truth. You are not losing anything. You are shedding. You are evolving. You are rising into a version of yourself that requires a different environment, a different circle, and a different level of energy around you. And those who truly belong in your life will grow with you, not hold you back. 4. The best version of you only appears in silence. Most people want to change their lives, but they stay trapped in environments full of noise, distraction, and confusion. They carry dreams in their hearts, but spend their days surrounded by constant stimulation, endless conversations, notifications, opinions, arguments, screens, and social pressure. Their minds are always busy, always reacting, always running from one thought to another. In that state, it becomes impossible to hear your own inner wisdom, let alone transform into the person you wish to become. Silence is not just the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of distraction, the absence of emotional chaos, the absence of mental clutter. It is a space where the mind can breathe, where thoughts become organized, where truth can finally rise to the surface. This is why every great spiritual teacher, including Buddha, spent time in solitude, not because they wanted to escape the world, but because they needed clarity to understand it. True transformation does not happen in noise. It happens in silence. When you choose silence, something powerful begins inside you. Your mind starts to settle. The stress you carry begins to fade. The overthinking that used to exhaust you slows down. You start seeing patterns in your behavior that you never noticed. You understand why you react the way you do, why you repeat the same mistakes, why certain habits control your life. You begin to recognize the real obstacles holding you back, not other people, not society, not luck, but the internal blocks you never had time to observe. In silence, you start developing qualities that only grow when the mind is still. You learn discipline, the skill of staying focused without needing external motivation. You learn patience, the ability to wait without frustration or panic. You learn emotional balance, the strength to feel your emotions without letting them overpower you. You also start to understand the difference between what you want and what the world wants for you. When the world becomes quiet, your soul becomes loud. Buddhism teaches that wisdom comes from deep observation, not from constant movement. When you sit alone without distractions, you begin observing your thoughts like clouds passing through the sky. You stop identifying with every emotion. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop trying to control everything. And slowly, you become calm, not because life becomes easier, but because your mind becomes stronger. This is the stage where your best self begins to appear, the self that is confident without needing attention, the self that is peaceful without needing anyone to behave a certain way, the self that is disciplined, aware, and in control of its own path. You start showing up differently, not rushing, not panicking, not explaining yourself to everyone, not chasing people, not needing constant validation. You carry a quiet strength that others can feel without you saying a word. The silence also helps you reconnect with your purpose. You begin asking deeper questions. What kind of person do I want to become? What habits support my peace? What habits destroy it? What path feels meaningful to me? What do I need to let go of in order to grow? These answers never come in noise. They only come when the world becomes quiet enough for you to listen. And when you finally meet this better version of yourself, calm, focused, wise, patient, and self-aware, your entire life begins to shift. Your relationships become healthier, your choices become clearer, your future becomes brighter. You attract different people, different opportunities, different experiences because your energy has changed. This transformation doesn't require perfection. It only requires silence and the courage to be alone with your own truth. The best version of you is not found outside. It is uncovered inside. And silence is the key that opens that door. 5. Solitude teaches you the power of letting go. Letting go is one of the hardest spiritual lessons a human being can learn, not because we don't want to move forward, but because our mind is wired to hold on to anything that feels familiar, even if it causes pain. We hold on to people who have already left us emotionally. We hold on to memories that hurt us every time we recall them. We hold on to habits that damage our peace. We hold on to expectations that never match reality. Deep down, we believe that holding on keeps us safe, but in truth, it is the very thing that keeps us suffering. But everything changes when you choose solitude. When life becomes quiet, when distractions fall away, when you stop drowning in the world's noise, you finally come face to face with the parts of yourself you've been avoiding for years. The old wounds you pushed aside come back and ask for attention. The disappointments buried inside your heart rise to the surface. The grief, the guilt, the regret. Everything you tried to suppress reveals itself because silence has a way of uncovering the truth. Most people think healing means forcing themselves to move on, but that mentality only leads to frustration. You cannot outrun your emotions. You cannot pretend something never happened. You cannot wake up one morning and expect the past to disappear just because you wish it would. Letting go is not an instant switch. It is a gradual release. And this release only begins when you sit alone long enough to understand your pain instead of escaping it. In solitude, you learn that emotions are not enemies. Your sadness is trying to teach you what mattered. Your fear is trying to protect you. Your disappointment is showing you where your expectations were unrealistic. Your anger is revealing where your boundaries were crossed. These emotions are not problems. They are messages. And when you stop running and start listening, you begin to heal naturally. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from clinging, holding on to what wants to leave or resisting what life is trying to change. When you cling tightly to your past, you block the possibility of a better future. When you cling to old relationships, you cannot create space for new blessings. When you cling to old pain, you remain stuck in the same emotional cycle. Letting go does not mean erasing your past. It means loosening your grip so life can redirect you toward where you truly belong. Solitude becomes your teacher in this process. When you are alone, you start understanding why certain people left your life. You begin seeing that some endings were actually protection. You realize that holding on to something that has already served its purpose only prolongs your suffering. You begin recognizing the truth. Not everything or everyone is meant to stay with you forever, and that is not a loss. It is the natural rhythm of growth. The more time you spend with yourself, the more you understand your own patterns. You see how often you stayed in situations long after they stopped nurturing your spirit. You see how often you accepted less than you deserved because you feared being alone. You see how often you bent your boundaries to keep people close who never valued you. And slowly, the deeper truth appears. Solitude is not your enemy, it is your liberation. Letting go becomes easier when you realize that peace is more valuable than attachment. You begin choosing your inner calm over the need to hold on to something familiar but harmful. You start releasing expectations of how life should be and start accepting life as it is. You stop forcing connections and start allowing relationships to be natural. You stop chasing closure and start creating healing through understanding. And something beautiful happens when you develop this mindset. You stop begging the past to come back. You stop making excuses for people who hurt you. You stop reopening doors that lead nowhere. You free yourself from emotional chains that have held you down for years. You step into a new version of yourself, lighter, clearer, stronger. Letting go is not about forgetting. It's about choosing freedom over fear. It's about trusting that life has something better ahead. It's about understanding that the pain was part of your journey, not the end of it. It's about realizing that the version of you who suffered is not the version of you who will rise. And solitude gives you the strength to make this transformation. When the world becomes quiet, your heart learns how to heal without being rushed. Your mind learns how to release without being forced. Your soul learns how to move forward without needing permission. Letting go becomes not an act of pain, but an act of deep inner compassion. A gift you give yourself when you finally understand that holding on hurts more than releasing ever will. 6. Being alone helps you build a stronger mind. Most people underestimate the strength of their own mind because they never give it the chance to grow on its own. From childhood to adulthood, they are constantly surrounded by opinions, expectations, and noise that shape the way they think. They depend on the world to tell them what is right, what is wrong, what they should do, who they should be, and how they should live. Their mental world becomes reactive instead of intentional. They think because others think for them. They choose because others choose for them. They follow habits that they never consciously created. In this state, the mind remains weak, not because the person is weak, but because the mind was never trained to stand alone. Solitude changes this. When you spend time alone, something powerful begins within you. Your mind slowly shifts from being shaped by the world to shaping the world you want to create. In solitude, you finally have the time and space to observe your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. You start noticing how your mind jumps, wanders, worries, overreacts, repeats old fears, or believes things that were never true. It is in these moments of deep self-awareness that the mind starts to strengthen. Most people think a strong mind is loud, aggressive, confident, or dominant. But in Buddhism, a strong mind is quiet, stable, aware, and disciplined. A strong mind is not a mind that never falls. It is a mind that knows how to rise every time it falls. And this kind of inner strength is built in silence, not noise. In solitude, you naturally begin developing mental discipline. You learn how to control your impulses, the need to check your phone constantly, the urge to react to everything, the habit of running away from discomfort. You learn to sit with your thoughts without panicking. You learn to allow emotions to rise and fall without fighting or suppressing them. Over time, you stop being a prisoner of your thoughts and start becoming the observer of them. This shift is life-changing. You also start becoming more conscious of your habits. You realize which habits waste your energy, which habits drain your confidence, which habits keep you stuck in the same emotional loops, and which habits help you grow. In solitude, you begin replacing old patterns with better ones, not because someone forced you, but because your own mind becomes disciplined enough to choose what is truly good for you. When your circle becomes smaller, your mental focus becomes stronger. When you stop spending your time in unnecessary conversations, pointless arguments, toxic environments, or meaningless distractions, your mind becomes sharp. You start thinking clearly, planning better, understanding more deeply. You read more, learn more, reflect more, and question more. The mind becomes your tool, not your enemy. Buddhism teaches that the mind creates both suffering and peace. A weak mind is easily shaken by every problem, every opinion, every criticism, every uncertainty. A strong mind remains steady even when life becomes chaotic. And solitude is the place where this strength is slowly built. As you spend more time alone, you begin to understand yourself better. You notice which thoughts are truly yours and which were planted by others. You recognize how often your fears come from imagined outcomes rather than reality. You start understanding that many of your worries were illusions created by an untrained mind. And as this awareness grows, your mind becomes lighter, calmer, and wiser. You also begin developing emotional intelligence. You start understanding why you feel a certain way, what triggers you, what calms you, and what helps you stay grounded. You learn that you don't need to react to everything that happens around you. You don't need to respond to every offense, justify every decision, or defend every action. When your mind becomes strong, silence becomes your power, not your weakness. Eventually, you reach a point where your peace is no longer controlled by other people. Your mind becomes your home, not a battlefield. Your thoughts become your guides, not your enemies. Your solitude becomes your power, not your punishment. You stop relying on the world to tell you who you are, because you've already discovered the truth inside you. And when you return to the world after building this inner strength, you move differently. You think differently. You respond differently. You stand taller, not physically, but mentally. You no longer break under pressure. You no longer collapse when people misunderstand you. You no longer chase approval. You no longer fear being alone, because you finally realize that the strongest mind is the mind that knows how to walk alone without losing itself. 7. When you become better. Alone, life aligns with you. There is a quiet truth about life that most people never discover because they spend so much time trying to control everything around them. Life begins to fall into place the moment you stop chasing the world and start improving yourself in silence. When you grow internally, the external world adjusts naturally. When you change who you are on the inside, what happens to you on the outside transforms without force. You don't have to push. You don't have to beg. You don't have to struggle endlessly. You simply have to rise into a version of yourself that is capable of receiving the blessings you keep praying for. And it is solitude that makes this transformation possible. People often believe that a better life comes from better luck, better timing, better opportunities, or better people. But Buddhism teaches something completely different. Your life mirrors your inner state. Whatever energy you cultivate internally is the energy that life returns back to you. When your mind is cluttered, your life feels chaotic. When your heart is wounded, every relationship feels unstable. When your thoughts are negative, everything around you appears dark. But when you become better within yourself, calmer, wiser, stronger, more aware, life naturally begins to shift in ways you couldn't see before. This is why solitude is not just peaceful, it is transformative. When you pull away from the noise of the world and spend time understanding your thoughts, your emotions, your patterns, your pain, and your purpose, you begin to rebuild yourself from the inside. You start noticing the things that once controlled you. Old habits that held you back, fears that kept you small, expectations that drained your joy, and attachments that exhausted your spirit. Solitude shows you these things clearly, and once you see them, you can begin changing them. You rise into a higher version of yourself, one that is more aligned, more conscious, more intentional. The moment this internal shift happens, your entire life begins to respond differently. You start attracting people who match your new energy. You stop tolerating behaviors that once hurt you. You walk away from situations that no longer align with your peace. You make better decisions because you are no longer driven by fear or insecurity. You become patient, deliberate, and confident in a calm, quiet way. life feels less like a battle and more like a path unfolding beneath your feet. One of the greatest misconceptions people have is that life changes by changing the outside. But Buddhism teaches that everything begins internally. A peaceful mind creates a peaceful life. A disciplined mind creates a successful life. A compassionate mind creates loving relationships. An awakened mind creates clarity and direction. When you change everything around you slowly begins to shift to match that version. This is why working on yourself alone, without distraction, without comparison, without external pressure, is one of the most powerful things you can ever do for your life. As you improve alone, you begin understanding something deeply spiritual. You do not need the world to validate your path. You no longer depend on people's approval to feel worthy. You no longer depend on someone else's presence to feel whole. You no longer require constant noise to feel alive. You learn to enjoy the quiet moments. You learn to appreciate your own company. You learn to trust yourself. You learn to listen to the whisper of your intuition. In that silence, you begin to understand what truly matters, not according to society, but according to your soul. This inner alignment changes the choices you make. Instead of rushing to fix everything externally, you begin observing life with more clarity. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond with awareness. Instead of seeking happiness from outside, you create it within. This makes you stable in a world that constantly tries to shake you. People feel the difference when they meet you. They may not understand the change, but they sense the strength, the calmness, the confidence, the grounded energy you carry. And slowly, the parts of your life that once felt chaotic begin settling. The opportunities that were once out of reach begin showing up. The relationships that drained you fall away. The fears that held you back lose their power. You realize that nothing was wrong with your life. It was your inner world that needed balance. Once your inner world aligns, life follows like a shadow. Consider this. When your mind becomes clear, you stop making decisions from confusion. When your heart becomes healed, you stop choosing people from loneliness. When your spirit becomes strong, you stop being affected by minor setbacks. When you develop discipline in solitude, you stop wasting time and start focusing on actions that move your life forward. All of this creates a ripple effect that eventually changes everything around you. This is why solitude is not emptiness. It is alignment. It helps you become so centered within yourself that life begins to cooperate with you instead of resisting you. Sometimes people ask why their life doesn't improve even after working hard. But the truth is that hard work without inner alignment leads to burnout. You can work day and night, but if your mind is chaotic, your efforts scatter. When you work from a place of clarity and inner peace, your efforts concentrate. You become more effective, more focused, more determined, and more guided. This inner clarity leads to better decisions, and those decisions lead to a better life. And perhaps the greatest gift of becoming better alone is this. You no longer fear losing anything. You don't fear losing people because you don't depend on them for happiness. You don't fear losing opportunities because you trust that what belongs to you will arrive. You don't fear temporary setbacks because you know how to rebuild yourself. You don't fear change because you've already changed within. This fearlessness creates flow. You stop forcing life. You stop chasing things. You stop holding on too tightly. You begin allowing life to unfold naturally. You trust the timing. You trust the lessons. You trust the silence. You trust the slow seasons. You trust the growth that happens behind the scenes. And because of this trust, life becomes smoother, not perfect, but peaceful in a way you never experienced before. This is what it means when we say life falls into place once you become better alone. It doesn't mean life becomes effortless. It means you become stronger, wiser, and more capable of handling whatever life brings. It means you develop a level of self-awareness that guides you toward what is right and away from what is wrong. It means you begin living intentionally instead of impulsively. It means you grow into someone who can walk through life with calm confidence, unshaken by chaos, unbroken by hardship, and untouched by negativity. In the end, solitude reveals the greatest truth of all. You are the foundation of your own life. If you build that foundation strong, everything you build upon it will stand. If you strengthen your mind, your future strengthens. If you heal your heart, your relationships heal. If you discipline your habits, your success grows. If you improve your inner world, your outer world follows. So walk alone for a while. Grow alone, heal alone, reflect alone, learn alone, become better alone, not because you want to avoid the world, but because you want to return to it as the most powerful version of yourself. And when you do, life will rearrange itself in ways that feel almost magical. Not because the universe suddenly changed, but because you did. 8. Your life changes the moment you learn to be your own source of peace. One of the greatest turning points in a person's life is when they finally understand that peace is not something the world gives you. Peace is something you create within yourself. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for peace to come from outside. They wait for people to treat them better. They wait for situations to become easier. They wait for circumstances to improve. They wait for life to slow down. And because they keep waiting, they keep suffering. Because the truth is simple. The world will never consistently give you peace, but you can always learn to create it inside you. This realization begins the moment you start spending time alone. Solitude strips away all the illusions you built around yourself. It removes the noise, the distractions, the comparisons, the external pressures, and the expectations. And for the first time, you see clearly that much of your stress came from depending on the world to manage your emotions. You were waiting for people to make you feel valued. You were hoping circumstances would make you feel safe. You were expecting life to make you feel complete. But peace cannot survive on external sources. The moment they change, your peace disappears. This is why solitude is such a powerful teacher. When the world becomes quiet, you finally realize that peace was never outside. It was always inside you, buried under layers of fear, confusion, overthinking, regret, and attachment. And slowly, with every moment you spend alone, you begin clearing those layers. You start noticing how much your happiness shifted depending on who approved of you and who didn't. You notice how quickly your mood changed based on small external events. A message could make you happy, and silence could destroy your confidence. A compliment could lift you up, and a little criticism could break you. This emotional instability is the mind's way of telling you that you have given too much power to the world. But when you walk alone, truly alone, not lonely, but connected with yourself, something inside begins to shift. You start stabilizing your emotions without needing someone else to reassure you. You learn to comfort yourself during difficult moments instead of running to distractions. You develop the ability to sit with your sadness without panicking and sit with your thoughts without drowning in them. This emotional strength creates inner peace, the kind that cannot be shaken easily. Buddhism teaches that peace does not come when external conditions are perfect. Peace comes when the mind is trained to remain calm despite external conditions. And solitude is the training ground for this calmness. When you learn to be alone, you begin understanding your emotional triggers. You see why your heart reacts the way it does. You learn how your mind creates stories that add unnecessary suffering. You become aware of how often you interpret situations through the lens of fear or insecurity rather than wisdom. This awareness leads to transformation. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop assuming the worst. You stop taking everything personally. Instead, you respond with understanding, clarity, and gentleness, not just toward others, but toward yourself. The more time you spend in solitude, the more you realize that peace is not something you chase. Peace is something you build slowly inside you. You start valuing your quiet moments. You begin choosing calmness over chaos, presence over distraction, and clarity over emotional storms. You begin recognizing that every time you remain calm in a situation where you once would have panicked, you are becoming stronger. Every time you choose silence instead of arguing, you grow wiser. Every time you breathe deeply instead of reacting instantly, you elevate your spirit. These small moments form the foundation of inner peace. With time, you also learn that peace requires letting go, not just of people but of old versions of yourself. You release the identity that was built on seeking approval. You release the mindset that depended on others to feel whole. You release the habits that damaged your mental well-being. And with each release, you become lighter, clearer, and more aligned with your true self. As your inner peace strengthens, your outer world begins to transform naturally. You stop feeling drawn to people who thrive on drama or chaos. You lose interest in meaningless conversations or environments that drain your energy. You begin choosing better, not because someone told you to, but because your spirit no longer tolerates anything that disturbs its calm. You start attracting people who reflect your new level of peace. Gentle, understanding, respectful, mindful individuals who bring harmony rather than conflict. One of the most profound changes that occurs when you become your own source of peace is that life stops feeling like a constant battle. You start flowing with it. You stop forcing things to happen. You stop chasing what runs away from you. You stop clinging to what tries to leave. Instead, you allow life to unfold in its own timing. You trust that what is meant for you will reach you, and what is not meant for you will drift away. This trust removes so much unnecessary suffering. You also begin healing your relationship with yourself. You become kinder to your mind, softer with your heart, and more patient with your journey. You stop criticizing yourself for being imperfect. You stop blaming yourself for your past. You start understanding that growth takes time and that the person you are becoming is more important than the mistakes you've made. You develop a deep sense of compassion for your own struggles, and this compassion becomes the foundation of your peace. And perhaps the most beautiful part of learning to become your own source of peace is this. You become unshakable, not cold, not distant, not disconnected, just unshakable. You still feel emotions deeply, you still care, you still love, you still experience joy, sadness, fear, and hope. But these emotions no longer control your life. You don't drown in them. You don't let them define you. You don't let them push you into impulsive decisions. You observe them, understand them, and let them pass like waves. You become the calm center beneath the storm of your emotions. You realize that life will always bring challenges, heartbreaks, disappointments, losses, uncertainties, but as long as your peace is anchored inside you, nothing can destroy you. You become the type of person who can stand alone without feeling empty. You can face uncertainty without collapsing. You can lose people without losing yourself. You can walk through chaos without letting it enter you. This is the ultimate strength. Quiet, steady, unwavering. In the end, solitude teaches you one of the deepest spiritual truths. Peace is not the result of a perfect life. Peace is the result of a trained heart and a disciplined mind. Once you learn to create peace within yourself, you carry it everywhere you go. And the world, seeing this peace within you, begins to soften as well. Your life becomes calmer, smoother, clearer, not because the world changed, but because you did. And once this inner shift happens, everything else begins to align. 9. Your entire path changes when you stop seeking validation and start trusting yourself. One of the deepest forms of suffering in human life comes from the endless need for validation. People spend years, sometimes their entire lives, trying to prove themselves to others, to be seen, to be approved of, to be understood, to be appreciated, to be accepted. They shape their personalities to be liked. They hide parts of themselves to avoid judgment. They change their dreams to match what society calls successful. They silence their truth out of fear of being misunderstood, and in the process, they lose the most important relationship they will ever have, the relationship with their own self. But when you begin the journey of solitude and self-discovery, you eventually reach a powerful realization. The moment you stop seeking validation from others is the moment your true path finally begins. Because you cannot walk your own path while constantly looking over your shoulder to see who approves of each step. Validation is a subtle prison. It convinces you that your worth depends on someone else's opinion. It makes you chase acceptance like a never-ending race. It forces you to measure yourself through standards you never chose. And worst of all, it blinds you from seeing your true potential because you are too busy trying to meet the expectations of people who don't even know your soul. When you start walking alone, you begin to see this clearly. You begin noticing how much of your identity was shaped by the need to please others. You see how many decisions you made just to avoid disappointing someone. You see how many dreams you abandoned because you feared judgment. You realize how deeply you tied your self-worth to the reactions of people who may not even remember half the things they said to you. In solitude, this truth is painful, but it is also liberating. Solitude helps you detach from the need to impress. When no one is watching, you finally get to ask yourself the questions that truly matter. What do I want? Who am I becoming? What do I believe is right for my life? What makes my heart feel alive, peaceful, and fulfilled? At first, these questions feel unfamiliar because most people are not taught to think this way. They are taught to perform, to fit in, to follow the crowd, to imitate what society says is meaningful. But solitude breaks this illusion. It brings you face to face with the truth that your path will never look like anyone else's, and it's not supposed to. Buddhism teaches that every being has its own unique essence, its own inner nature, its own karmic path, its own rhythm of growth. When you try to live according to someone else's path, you disconnect from your own nature. This disconnection creates anxiety, emptiness, and confusion, because deep down, your soul knows when you are not living your truth. When you stop seeking validation, the world inside you begins to open. You begin understanding your strengths more clearly without comparing them to others. You become aware of your weaknesses without feeling ashamed. You start making decisions based on intuition instead of pressure. Trusting yourself becomes a spiritual practice, one that connects you to your inner wisdom, your inner voice, your inner guide. You begin to recognize that every time you trust your intuition, your life becomes lighter. Every time you listen to your inner voice, you feel calmer. Every time you follow your own sense of truth, life feels more aligned, more meaningful, more peaceful. This is not an accident. This is the natural consequence of shifting from external validation to internal alignment. As this trust grows, something beautiful begins to happen. Your confidence becomes quiet and unshakable, not loud, not arrogant, just steady, grounded, and peaceful. You no longer need to announce your plans. You no longer need to justify your choices. You no longer need to convince anyone to understand you. You no longer need applause after every step. Your validation comes from within, from knowing that you are walking a path that feels true to your own soul. With this inner trust, the fear of judgment begins to dissolve. You realize that people will always have opinions, no matter what you do. No matter how good you are, no matter how hard you try, no matter how pure your intentions, someone will always misunderstand you. Someone will always criticize. Someone will always doubt you. That is their path, not yours. And you learn to let their opinions pass through your mind like wind, without letting them disturb your peace. The more you trust yourself, the more you stop looking at the world for permission. You stop waiting for approval before making a move. You stop letting rejection define your worth. Instead, you move with purpose. You move with clarity. You move with inner stability. You move in silence, understanding that the only person who needs to believe in your journey is you. And because you no longer fear disapproval, you also stop settling for less. You walk away from relationships that drain your spirit. You let go of friendships that only survive when you shrink yourself. You distance yourself from people who only support you when you follow their script. You release environments that crush your peace or limit your growth. You stop compromising your identity just to belong. This is where your life begins to transform. When you stop needing validation, you start choosing what truly aligns with you, whether it's people, goals, habits, or environments. Your standards rise, your boundaries strengthen, your self-respect deepens. You begin protecting your inner peace like something sacred because you understand that without peace, nothing in life feels meaningful. And something incredible happens at this stage. The moment you no longer seek validation, you begin attracting people who respect you without you asking, people who value your boundaries, people who appreciate your authenticity, people who are drawn to your calm confidence, people who are supportive without controlling, people who connect with you for who you are, not for who they want you to be. This is the beauty of inner alignment. Once you honor your true self, the world sends you people who align with that truth. As your trust in yourself deepens, your relationship with life itself begins to soften. You stop rushing, you stop forcing, you stop comparing. You begin moving with trust, trusting that your inner voice will guide you where you need to go, trusting that you have the strength to overcome whatever challenges arise, trusting that your growth is unfolding in perfect timing, trusting that every experience, even the painful ones, serves your evolution. Buddhism teaches that the greatest wisdom comes from seeing your own nature clearly. When you stop seeking validation, you finally see your nature. You see your potential, your gifts, your purpose, your direction. You no longer live reactively, you live consciously. You no longer live through the eyes of others, you live through the awareness of your own heart. And when this shift happens, your entire path begins to change. Life stops feeling heavy, choices become clearer, your steps become lighter, your future becomes brighter. Peace becomes your companion, purpose becomes your compass, and your inner voice becomes your guide. This is the moment when everything finally aligns, not because the world changed, not because people changed, not because circumstances changed, but because you changed. You stopped needing the world to approve of your journey. You began trusting yourself instead, and that single shift is powerful enough to change the entire direction of your life. 10. The day you realize you are responsible for your own happiness, your entire life transforms. One of the most life-changing realizations you will ever experience is this: no one is coming to save you from your own unhappiness. Not a relationship, not a friend, not a parent, not money, not success, not attention, not approval. For most people, this truth feels heavy at first because they have spent years hoping that someone or something outside themselves would make their life better. They believed that happiness would arrive when they found the right person, achieved the right goal, reached a certain age, or earned a certain amount of money. But life has a gentle way of showing you that all these external things, while beautiful, are temporary. And because they are temporary, they can never provide permanent happiness. The real breakthrough happens when you are alone with yourself. In solitude, you begin to see how much of your emotional world has been shaped by external forces. You notice how your mood changes depending on whether someone praises you or criticizes you, whether your plans succeed or fail, whether someone stays or leaves. You begin to see how unstable your inner world becomes when it depends on forces you cannot control. And for the first time, you understand that true happiness must come from within, because the things outside you will always change. This realization is not meant to make you feel lonely. In fact, it is the beginning of your inner freedom. When you understand that your happiness is in your own hands, you stop waiting. You stop depending, you stop clinging, you stop living reactively, like a leaf that gets blown around by every gust of wind. Instead, you take responsibility for your inner world. You begin strengthening your mind. You begin healing your heart. You begin cultivating habits that support your well-being. You begin choosing peace instead of chaos, clarity instead of confusion, growth instead of stagnation. Buddhism teaches that happiness is not something you find. It is something you create through awareness, discipline, kindness, acceptance, and understanding. Happiness is the result of a mind that is free from unnecessary suffering. And unnecessary suffering comes from one thing: expecting life, people, or the world to make you happy. When you let go of this expectation, you gain the inner power to build a life that feels meaningful, peaceful, and aligned with your soul. When you choose to take responsibility for your happiness, you stop blaming others. You stop saying, "I'm unhappy because of this person," or "I'm unhappy because my life didn't go the way I wanted," or "I'm unhappy because I don't have what others have." Instead, you begin asking deeper, wiser questions. What thoughts am I feeding? What habits are destroying my peace? What wounds am I ignoring? What parts of my life need healing? What boundaries do I need to create? What beliefs are keeping me stuck? These questions guide you inward. They help you understand that happiness is not about adding more to your life. It's about removing what is blocking your inner peace. It may be old beliefs, toxic attachments, stagnant environments, self-doubt, or unhealed memories. When you confront these things in solitude, you begin to clear them away one by one. Slowly, you learn that happiness is not a constant high. It is a steady state of inner peace. It is the ability to remain calm even when life is not perfect. It is the strength to trust your journey even when you don't understand it. It is the maturity to choose your responses instead of reacting emotionally. It is the awareness to let go of things that disturb your soul. This level of happiness is spiritual. It is stable. It is deep. And it does not disappear when circumstances change. As you take more responsibility for your happiness, you begin making different choices. You start prioritizing your mental and emotional health. You release relationships that drain your spirit. You stop engaging in arguments that lead nowhere. You distance yourself from people who manipulate your peace. You choose silence over unnecessary conflict. You create space for activities that nourish your mind: reading, meditation, reflection, prayer, journaling, nature walks. You take control of the direction of your life instead of waiting for someone else to guide you. You also stop expecting others to understand you completely. You accept that people can care about you and still never fully grasp the storms inside your heart. You realize that expecting someone to rescue you from your pain is unfair, not just to you, but to them. Everyone is carrying their own burdens. Everyone is trying to heal in their own way. When you take responsibility for your happiness, you stop making others carry the weight of your emotions. You release them from expectations that they were never born to fulfill. This is where your relationships begin to transform. You no longer approach people with desperation, fear, or neediness. You approach them with clarity and emotional stability. You don't ask them to complete you. You don't ask them to fill your empty spaces. Instead, you share your happiness with them, not because you need them to be whole, but because you are already whole on your own. This creates healthier, deeper, more peaceful connections. Life also becomes less frightening. When you know you are responsible for your happiness, you stop fearing change. You stop fearing loss. You stop fearing the future. You understand that happiness is something you can rebuild at any time because it is something you carry within you. This inner stability allows you to walk through life with confidence. You trust your choices. You trust your growth. You trust your ability to rebuild if needed. You become grounded in a way that external events cannot destroy, and slowly your entire path begins to change. You begin attracting better opportunities because your mind is clearer. You begin noticing possibilities you once ignored because your awareness is sharper. You begin feeling lighter because you are no longer burdened by expectations. You begin experiencing life more deeply because you are fully present instead of mentally stuck in the past or anxious about the future. This presence creates peace. and peace creates happiness. Taking responsibility for your happiness does not mean isolating yourself or rejecting help. It simply means you understand that your emotional foundation must come from within. Others can support you, but they cannot build your inner world for you. That is your sacred responsibility, and once you accept it, you step into a level of freedom that very few people ever experience. In the end, the greatest truth you learn is this: your happiness is your power. When you create it from within, nobody can take it. When you nurture it through awareness, it grows every day. When you protect it with boundaries, it becomes unshakable. When you share it, it multiplies. And when you live from it, your entire life aligns with clarity, purpose, and peace. This is the moment when you finally understand what it means to be truly free. 11. Inner strength begins the moment you stop running from yourself. One of the reasons people feel lost, anxious, or emotionally exhausted is because they spend their entire lives running, not from the world, but from themselves. They run from their thoughts, from their fears, from their memories, from their regrets, from their insecurities, and from the parts of their heart that still hurt. They avoid silence because silence exposes truth. They avoid solitude because solitude forces reflection. They avoid stillness because stillness brings up everything they buried. And because of this constant inner running, they never find peace. They never fully heal. They never meet who they truly are beneath the layers of distraction. But there comes a moment, often in solitude, when you realize you can't keep running forever. You cannot outrun your own mind. You cannot escape the emotions living inside you. You cannot hide from the parts of yourself that are crying for attention, and it is in this moment that a powerful transformation begins. Inner strength is born the moment you stop running from yourself and finally turn inward. This turning inward is not easy. In fact, it is one of the hardest things you will ever do, because facing yourself requires honesty, it requires vulnerability, it requires courage, it requires the willingness to see your wounds without pretending they don't exist. It requires the humility to admit where you went wrong and the wisdom to understand why you repeated certain patterns. But this inner confrontation is the beginning of healing. The kind of healing that cannot happen when you distract yourself with noise, people, or constant activity. When you sit alone with yourself, you begin to see your life with clarity. You recognize the wounds you have been carrying from childhood. You see how certain experiences shaped the way you think and respond. You understand why certain relationships triggered deep emotions. You learn the real reasons behind your fears: fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. You start connecting the dots between your past and your present. This awareness is painful, but it is also liberating, because once you understand your pain, it stops controlling you. Buddhism teaches that suffering continues as long as we refuse to see its root. When you stop running and allow yourself to observe your own heart, you begin uncovering the roots of your suffering. You see the patterns you unintentionally repeat. You notice the cycles you keep falling into. You understand how your own mind has been creating stories that deepen your pain. This understanding is the foundation of inner strength, because you cannot change what you are too afraid to face. The surprising thing is that once you stop running, your inner world becomes less frightening. The emotions you feared begin to soften. The thoughts you avoided start making sense. The memories you suppressed lose their power. You begin to realize that your mind isn't your enemy. It simply needed attention, understanding, and compassion. When you look inward with gentleness, the parts of you that were hurting slowly begin to heal. As this healing begins, your inner strength grows naturally. You become emotionally steadier because you understand yourself better. You stop reacting impulsively because you can trace your emotions to their root. You become less defensive because you no longer feel threatened by truth. You become more compassionate because you understand your own pain deeply enough to recognize it in others. You begin to trust yourself because you finally understand who you are beneath all the fear, insecurity, and noise. With inner strength comes clarity. When you stop running from yourself, you learn what truly matters to you. Not what the world told you, not what people expect from you, not what society defines as success or happiness. You discover your own values, your own vision, your own purpose. You begin making choices that align with your true nature instead of choices made out of fear or pressure. This alignment creates peace, real peace, the kind that stays even when life becomes difficult. You also begin setting boundaries more naturally. When you understand your own heart, you stop allowing people to disrespect it. You stop tolerating energy that drains your spirit. You stop accepting situations that damage your well-being. You stop returning to relationships that mirror your unhealed wounds. By facing yourself, you begin protecting yourself, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. One of the most profound changes that occurs when you stop running from yourself is the disappearance of inner loneliness. Most people believe they feel lonely because they lack people, but true loneliness comes from being disconnected from yourself. When you avoid your own heart, you feel empty even when surrounded by crowds. But when you reconnect with your inner self, deeply, honestly, compassionately, you begin to feel whole even in solitude. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your inner voice. You begin to feel supported from within. And this inner fullness ends the emotional desperation that once made you chase the wrong people, the wrong habits, and the wrong environments. As your inner strength deepens, your relationship with the world changes in subtle but powerful ways. You stop being shaken by small problems. You stop drowning in unnecessary worries. You stop fearing other people's opinions. You stop over-explaining yourself. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth to anyone, because your worth is no longer determined by the outside world. It comes from understanding your own inner truth. This transformation is not loud or dramatic. It unfolds slowly, quietly, peacefully, like dawn replacing the darkness. One day you simply realize that situations that once triggered you no longer control your emotions. People who once affected you deeply no longer have the same power. Problems that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. You don't break as easily. You don't panic as quickly. You don't collapse under pressure. You have become someone stronger, not because life became easier, but because you learned to face yourself instead of running from yourself. This is the essence of Buddhist wisdom. The path to freedom begins within. When you stop running from your inner world, you stop being controlled by it. When you understand your suffering, you stop feeding it. When you heal your wounds, you stop repeating cycles. When you meet your true self, you stop living as a stranger to your own soul. And in this inner meeting, something extraordinary happens. Your heart becomes your home. A place where you feel safe. A place where you feel understood. A place where you feel whole. Once this happens, no external force can take your peace. No person can shake your foundation. No situation can break your spirit. Because your strength does not come from the world. It comes from within you. This is the moment your life begins to rise. Not because you found the perfect path, but because you finally found the courage to stop running and walk into your own truth. 12. Your life evolves the moment you learn to detach with love, not bitterness. One of the most misunderstood spiritual skills is detachment. Many people think detachment means becoming cold, emotionless, disconnected, or uncaring. They imagine it as walking away with anger, shutting people out, or closing their heart forever. But true Buddhist detachment is nothing like that. True detachment is not an escape from love. It is a higher form of love. It is not the absence of emotion. It is the purification of emotion. It is not a wall. It is freedom. It is not bitterness. It is clarity. Detachment means you stop holding on to things that bring suffering. You stop clinging to people out of fear. You stop forcing relationships that aren't meant to stay. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop expecting life to unfold exactly the way you want. Instead, you begin to live with acceptance, understanding, and inner peace. You love deeply, but without chaining your happiness to outcomes you cannot control. You care fully, but without allowing your heart to depend on someone else's behavior. You give, you feel, you connect, but you remain rooted within yourself. This is the essence of spiritual maturity. Most people cannot detach because they confuse attachment with love. They believe that holding tightly means caring. They believe that clinging means loyalty. They believe that sacrificing their peace means commitment. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. Attachment is fear pretending to be love. When you cling because you fear losing. When you hold too tightly, you do it because your sense of worth depends on someone staying. When you force things, it is because you cannot trust life to unfold without your control. Solitude opens your eyes to this truth. When you spend time alone, you begin to see how attachment has created unnecessary suffering in your life. You see how often you ignored your own needs just to keep someone close. You see how often you tolerated disrespect or emotional chaos because you were afraid of being alone. You see how often you lowered your standards, bent your boundaries, or sacrificed your peace because you believed that losing someone meant losing yourself. In solitude, the truth rises. Nothing that requires you to lose yourself is worth holding on to. As you grow spiritually, you begin understanding that detachment is not walking away from people. It is walking away from unhealthy expectations. It is choosing peace over possession, clarity over desperation, and growth over fear. You stop trying to make people act a certain way. You stop expecting others to save you emotionally. You stop depending on others to make you feel whole. You release the illusion that someone outside you has the ability to complete you. Instead, you begin completing yourself. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, you no longer fear losing people. You no longer panic when someone pulls away. You no longer chase after anyone. You no longer break down when life removes what is not meant for your path, because your sense of security is no longer anchored in external circumstances. It is anchored in your own inner stability. Detachment becomes a gentle letting go, not with anger, but with understanding. Not with force, but with acceptance, not with resentment, but with gratitude for the lessons. You begin seeing that every person, every relationship, every friendship, every connection served a purpose. Some came to teach you love, some came to teach you resilience, some came to teach you boundaries, some came to teach you detachment, but none were meant to be possessed. People come and go, and the flow of life continues. The more you fight this flow, the more you suffer. The more you accept it, the more you grow. With detachment comes inner freedom. You begin to feel lighter because you stop carrying emotional weight. You begin to feel clearer because you stop overthinking every interaction. You begin to feel stronger because your happiness no longer collapses when others fail to meet your expectations. You become emotionally independent, spiritually grounded, and mentally stable. You feel love not as fear of losing something, but as a gift that flows naturally from your heart. Detachment also deepens your relationships. When you no longer cling, people feel safe around you. When you no longer try to control, relationships become healthier. When your love doesn't come with fear, conditions, or emotional pressure, it becomes purer. You love people as they are, not as you want them to be. You give them freedom, and freedom is the greatest expression of love. When you detach, life becomes peaceful. You stop overreacting. You stop assuming the worst. You stop needing to know everything. You stop trying to fix things that are out of your control. You learn to trust timing. You learn to trust the process. You learn to trust yourself. You learn to allow life to unfold without forcing it. Detachment also gives you clarity about who belongs in your life. When you stop chasing, the wrong people naturally fall away. When you stop clinging, the right people stay effortlessly. When you stop begging for love, you begin to receive love that is real because it is freely given, not taken under pressure. You begin attracting people whose energy matches your peace. Buddhism teaches that everything in life is temporary, not to make you sad, but to help you appreciate everything deeply without trying to possess it. When you embrace impermanence, your heart becomes more open, not less. You begin cherishing moments instead of clinging to them. You begin appreciating people instead of trying to own their presence. You begin loving with acceptance instead of fear. In solitude, you learn the art of letting things be. If someone stays, you welcome them. If someone leaves, you allow them. If something is meant for you, it will remain. If it is not, it will disappear, no matter how tightly you hold on. And this understanding brings immense peace. The most powerful part of detachment is the transformation it creates inside you. You become calm in situations that once made you anxious. You become stable in moments that once shook your heart. You become centered in circumstances that once overwhelmed you. You no longer fear change because change no longer threatens your sense of self. You no longer fear loss because you trust that life will always fill the space with something better, or with a better version of you. When you detach with love, you evolve, you rise, you grow into someone whose peace cannot be taken away easily, someone who knows how to let go without breaking, someone who knows how to stay without losing themselves, someone who loves without fear, someone who moves through life with quiet strength, steady faith, and inner balance. Detachment isn't the end of love. It is the beginning of mature love. Detachment isn't the end of connection. It is the beginning of healthy connection. Detachment isn't loneliness. It is freedom. Detachment isn't coldness. It is clarity. Detachment isn't giving up. It is awakening. When you detach with love, not bitterness, you finally understand that your peace is yours. Your growth is yours. Your journey is yours. And the people who are meant for you will walk beside you willingly, not because you held them tightly, but because your energy made them feel safe enough to stay. As you reach the end of this journey, there is something important you must understand. Everything you've learned, every lesson you've heard, every moment of inner reflection you've experienced, it all points to one truth. Your life changes the moment you change. Not when someone enters your life, not when circumstances magically align, not when the world becomes easier. Your life transforms from the inside out, quietly, slowly, powerfully, when you choose to sit with yourself, understand yourself, and become better within yourself. Walking alone is not a punishment. It is preparation. It is the universe clearing the noise around you so you can hear the voice within you. It is life removing the wrong people so the right lessons can reach you. It is your soul showing you who you truly are when the world is no longer distracting you. In solitude, you discovered your fears. You discovered your strength. You discovered your patterns. You discovered your wounds. But most importantly, you discovered your potential, the version of you that has always existed beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the pain. Every lesson on this journey has brought you closer to yourself. You learned that silence is not empty. It is full of answers. You learned that solitude is not loneliness. It is clarity. You learned that letting go is not losing. It is making space for better. You learned that emotional independence is not coldness, it is freedom. You learned that detachment is not rejection, it is maturity. You learned that peace is not found outside, it is created inside. You learned that happiness is not given, it is built. You learned that strength is not loud, it is calm. The person you become in your solitude is the person who will carry you through every challenge, every heartbreak, every disappointment, every change. The world will never stop moving. People will come and go. Circumstances will rise and fall. But your inner world, your awareness, your discipline, your emotional strength, your clarity, your peace, these are the things that will keep you steady no matter what happens around you. This is why Buddhism teaches that the greatest warrior is the one who conquers themselves. When you understand your mind, life becomes clearer. When you understand your emotions, relationships become calmer. When you understand your past, the future becomes less frightening. When you understand your patterns, you stop repeating suffering. When you understand your worth, the world stops defining it for you. You have walked through lessons that many people avoid their entire lives. You learn to face yourself instead of running from yourself. You learn to sit in silence instead of drowning in noise. You learn to hold your heart gently instead of judging it harshly. You learn to let things be instead of trying to control everything. These inner shifts may seem quiet from the outside, but inside they are monumental, because this is how a new life begins, not with noise, not with force, not with dramatic changes, but with small, sacred commitments to yourself. Commitments that build a wiser, calmer, stronger version of you. So let this conclusion be your reminder. You do not need to fear walking alone. You do not need to fear losing people who cannot walk your path. You do not need to fear moments of silence. You do not need to fear the unknown. Every step you take inward is a step toward freedom. Every moment you spend with yourself is a moment of growth. Every truth you uncover about yourself is a seed of transformation. And every time you choose peace over chaos, awareness over reaction, understanding over judgment, you are aligning your life with something greater, deeper, and more real than anything the outside world can offer. Let the world rush. Let people hurry. Let life be loud for others. You have found your center, the still point beneath all noise. You have found the place within you that will guide you, protect you, and strengthen you. You have found the truth that no one can ever take from you. You are enough, as you are, within yourself. Continue walking your path with grace. Continue choosing silence when the world becomes overwhelming. Continue protecting your peace like something sacred. Continue healing the wounds you once ignored. Continue trusting the timing of your journey. Continue becoming the version of yourself that your future needs. Because the moment you choose to become better alone, the entire universe begins moving with you, not against you. Doors open, burden fades, clarity arrives, people change, opportunities appear, and life, slowly, gently, begins to fall into place. Not because the world changed, but because you did.